Yesterday, quite a lot was, he addressed. But let me start with you, David Osiani. What was take home for you out of the speech? Of course, Jamhuri Day is a day that Kenyans expect the president to speak on certain milestones that we have made as a country, looking at now that we are 55 years. I don't know, what was take home for you?
And I think take home for me was the president spoke very passionately for a return of Kenya to its course. Now, what will be different is whether that return will be effected or it will remain in the speech. The president rescinded from his taxation of the housing. I know Magal and I have been very passionate about housing, but I think there must, in his considered opinion, there must have been a misadvice in part of taxation and levy on every Kenyan for the housing scheme, which he now said was his remodeling.
Voluntary.
He also has roped in the taxman in the war against graft, which is a very good, in my opinion, a very good thing, because the taxman can literally find you out if they are given the opportunity to help DCI. You know, the DCI has a mandate that only reaches somewhere. The taxman has his mandate also that has their mandate that reaches somewhere. If you amalgamate these two, then that would be very decent, because Kenyans are running away. You show up and you come and donate 25 million, and that's very good. Now the taxman can ask you, oh, son of God, where did you get this? Your tax, you declared last year that you had nil returns. How are you able to afford it this year? And so far you haven't even paid your taxes. So in the whole, the desire for a better Kenya, Uhuru seems to be very passionate about fighting corruption and also a cohesive nation. And I think he should focus on those two. There are times when I actually think that he should even leave the Big Four to run its course and say, I've put a 5 or 10-year plan for the Big Four agenda for housing. Whoever comes over, takes over from me will take over from where I have left. And here is the template. Here is where we were beginning. This is where I anticipate we will reach by 2022 when I exit office. However, in these 2 years, the irreducible minimums that I'm going to deal with is a fight against graft and leaving behind a cohesive nation. Cohesive nation, he should also be a bit deliberate and instruct the ministers under him. You cannot, in a country where we are talking about BBI, you cannot be seen to still appoint 6 consecutive heads of parastatals from your mother tongue's ethnic tribe. It can't work like that.
Yeah.
It is immoral. You see that morality we are talking about, calling lawyers to moral, these cabinet secretaries, because eventually it reflects on the president. Yet, it is not the president who appoints the CEOs of organizations. It's not him. It is the CS that he has entrusted with the duty of making that appointment, who effects that appointment. He trusts that the CS will listen to their inner conscience and read the mood of Kenyans and know the intent of the president. The president is intended on ensuring that we have a cohesive nation where all of us feel they are part of this country. So I think listening to him yesterday, the speech was a bit long, but that for me was the take-home. That was the highlight.
Right, Ruth, what is it that you picked out of the president's speech that you'd say, well, this was a good thing, at least for Kenya, and gives us traction?
Well, for me, any speech is intended to inspire Kenyans. So any other, for the remaining time that the president will be in office, we expect more inspiring speeches. But for me as a Kenyan, my concern is that is there action behind these words? Because any other time that the president is addressing Kenyans during a public holiday, he in one way or another, or at one point always purports to say this will be launched, this will be put in place. For instance, I heard him talk about the launching of the Naivasha Industrial Park by next week. And for me, my question becomes that, 1 month after that, 2 months after that, can we be able to take stock of what difference this launch of the Naivasha Industrial Park will have had on the Kenyans? When he launched the Big Four agenda, I think this was was it 2 years back or 2 years back in 2017, when he launched the Big Four agenda, what has been the impact of the Big Four agenda to the Kenyans? Because when we were talking about manufacturing, he talked about food security, manufacturing, universal health care, and affordable housing. Can Kenyans can Kenyans be a testament to this affordable housing that we are talking about? Do we already have some units in place? Remember, he has less than 3 years to be in office, basically 2.5 years before the elections come. And as a country, we know that when a certain period comes, a year before elections, forget about any form of development. The country officially goes into electioneering mode. Anybody who would be tasked with, and it is unfortunate, that is just the reality, but it is unfortunate that anybody in an elective position who should be basically championing for the interests of the citizens, ensuring that the development agenda has been achieved, their framework of mind will be in, will I be re-elected, or is my leader going to be elected? If I'm not going to be re-elected, is the person I am supporting going to be re-elected? So basically any conversation around development is suspended. So my question is, within this first 3 years, which would have been optimal for development, what did we achieve as a country? And in all honesty, if we were to measure the kind of achievement we have had in terms of the Big Four agenda, there is very little to write home about, because we still have scandals within the disaster management fund or programs that are supposed to ensure that whenever there's disaster, food is available to victims. We still do not see, when we talk about food security, first of all, the general plans to have Kenya a food secure country are not very material plans. We don't have solid plans that one would rely on and say that now I can see there are plans in place to ensure that by 2022 we're a food secure country. So on the basis of the Big Four agenda, I think we score on a scale of 1 to 100. I honestly think we score at 20%, because I have not seen much progress as a citizen. But on the basis of uniting the country in terms of there being a general feeling of peace, the absence of war does not necessarily mean the presence of peace. So the fact that we are peaceful right now, we still also cannot measure whether the unity between him and Raila Odinga really means peace on the ground for the people.
And how long it will last.
And how long it will last. Because if today we were to go into a general election, would we be guaranteed and sure that, we would not fight along tribal lines?
Okay, let me come to you, Philip Mangal. Yes. Were you inspired by the president? Do you feel that we are, like he says, putting the country back on course? The question might even be to some Kenyans, what course is our course? What are we being put back to?
Yes, that would be a good question from any Kenyan, especially if you think of Nairobi River, isn't it?
Yeah, no. And Nairobi being a river also.
Which Michuki tried to clean.
And Nairobi being a river right now.
Yes,
exactly.
But what came across out for me is that the president is very much focused on his legacy. He's been trying to send out a clear message that he's focused on his legacy, which constitutes a cohesive nation, the Big Four agenda, and the fight against corruption. Those were the running themes in his communication. And if you look at it within the context in which we are operating, he's been also consistent with his action. Nobody thought Sonko would be in court last week, but the man was arraigned in court, and he's a popular governor. You could see even the police had to be on a high alert to avert any crisis. Yes. Looking at the podium, though, you would see that, again, what actually makes him angry, and that is that the team that is supposed to support him consists of individuals who contradict him in every turn that he takes. You can imagine sitting at the podium and your leader of majority in Senate is representing the man that you've arraigned in court, arguing that it is a politically instigated charge.
To a point where you even have to have it as part of your Jamhuri Day speech.
Yes, to a point that you have to reprimand him. These people are not taking cue, and they're doing so intentionally, not that they're ignorant or they're stupid. They know what they are doing. They're out to politic, they're out to scuttle the president's fight against corruption, the Big Four agenda. They're out to polarize the nation. And I think this is what really frustrates him, and this is what gets him. He doesn't get necessarily angry, he really gets impassioned, when you launch BBI today. Tomorrow, there are people in the streets tearing it into pieces. You charge a governor in court. Tomorrow, there are some people within your own government accusing you of playing politics.
And maybe that brings him to the point where he has to mnataka nifanye nini, because I mean at the end of the day he is trying from his voice, from his body language, from what he has been consistent in terms of his speeches, whether it's a public rally, whether it's a national rally like this, he seems to have the heart to want to do this.
Yes.
But the question is, he has a team which you would expect to support him, but they just don't seem to get, either they don't get
and
it or they sabotage.
Yeah, and you see the thing is they're actually currently politicking. So even when we are talking about how well the Big Four agenda has done, because some Kenyans have argued that one of the reasons why BBI and I think it's a false argument. One of the reasons why the Building Bridges initiative was adopted was because they foresaw that the Big Four agenda was not going to be accomplished. Even as we are measuring how well the Big Four agenda has done, we shouldn't put the blame on the president. Again, as he has rightfully put it, those who should be charged with ensuring that the Big Four agenda has been achieved are the same people politicking, are the same people we are finding in scandals, are the same people whose ministries and departments, huge sums of monies are getting lost. So I think for the country to move forward and for the river to be taken back to its source, as we are saying, there needs to be concerted efforts, there needs to be joint collaboration. And this is not just collaboration from the leaders themselves, but even from the citizens themselves. And honestly, I feel that as a country, as citizens, we seem to have, we appear to be supporting the war against corruption in the sense that suddenly you see people did not take to the streets saying, oh, Sonko ni mtu wetu and things like that. And I believe and I hope to see the same carrying on. In terms of, I might have judged him very harshly, but I would want to just apportion the blame correctly and say that, look, as Magal has put it, his leaders are also to blame for the stalling of the kind of good projects and initiatives that the president has launched. We must also give it to him on the war against corruption, that for the first time in the history of the fight against corruption, we are seeing a massive number of big names that people would have expected the president to protect, because, for example, Waititu is one of the people who brought so many votes to the presidential basket of votes in 2017. And so was Sonko, on the list. So we are seeing the president being very unbiased in terms of this fight.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me bring in David Osiani. And David, do you understand the frustration the president has when he expects a team that within Jubilee, which is, his party, to support him, but they just seem to sabotage him. And what becomes even more frustrating, some of them are elected members. So he cannot just wake up one day and say
you are gone.
You're out of my team. Yeah.
No, I actually even find it laughable. I remember one time the Murkomens telling Gideon Moi that for you to be a leader, you must accept to be led. I expected them to be the ones to do that, to accept that the president has to lead them and to follow suit. I really wish that sometimes these theatrics and dissent that they openly have against Uhuru were stemmed or were founded on a genuine desire for country.
Yeah.
That they were doing it out of a desire for a better nation, out of the good that they have for the Kenyans. But it is done all for politics. All because it is an imagination that, for example, this BBI tool is for Raila's sake, so we have to oppose it. It doesn't matter that it has the Health Service Commission that will resolve the problems we've had in the health sector with managing our health workers. It doesn't matter that the BBI has proposed, for example, that our youth that all corporates have to set up a special fund to mentor young people into business. It doesn't matter that the BBI has decided that young people who are starting business, after being supported by these corporates, will have a 7-year tax holiday so that then they can stand on their 2 feet and start business and then man up, quote unquote, It doesn't matter what is good in that document. What it is a document for Raila, so we will oppose it. I wish that their dissent and opposition for some of these things were anchored on a desire for transformation, for a reformed country, but it is not. It is all for selfish gain. I wish that people have said that the deputy president has been made to look like he's the father of all the corrupt for the simple things that the Murkomens do. When Sonko is charged of corruption, and we don't know whether or not he is guilty, the DPP believes that he has sufficient evidence to nail Sonko. If the left-hand man of the deputy president is the one who goes to court. And of course, he is given a run down by Ogoti, the magistrate, and tells him, you know, you don't even practice in our court, so you don't know how things run here. And the whole majority leader embarrasses himself, a teacher of law, in court. And he's falling all over himself to defend a suspect. And he's the one who, even after Sonko says, you're not, I mean, after the magistrate says anything going on here must remain here, he's the one who runs ahead to publish how they have paid 15 million, as if it is something we ought to clap for, as if it is a moment of pride and not a moment of shame. And you're the leader of government business in Senate. And yet, when some laws are passed, you are not there. You are so readily available when Sonko is there being accused to go and you know, stand in the way of the law. Sonko has excellent lawyers in their own right. They Harrison Kinyanjuis, and they can battle that battle. If Sonko is guiltless, he will be declared free. You don't have to. As a senator, yours is to stand and say, okay, one, I'm the majority leader. The president is having a war against corruption. Even if your considered view is that Sonko is not guilty, you can lend your advice to his legal team without being on the forefront to show the president the wrong finger. All right? So it is frustrating, but what is good for me is that in another short while, Murkomen himself will probably be a governor in Elgeyo Marakwet. Probably. And when he becomes, he will have a chief officer or MCAs who defy him, who will not share his vision. What goes around, brother? Comes right around.
There was also a statement by the Deputy President, every Kenyan will have a decent meal, as he was giving the speech. And I'm sure many Kenyans, particularly the majority, would feel that this is something that has been talked about for so long.
Is that an invitation to Weston? We are happy to go.
Yeah, we can go and have a decent meal after this.
Unintended, right there. But it's something that Kenyans have had so many times. And maybe, I think it was you, Ruth, who was mentioning that we seem to say many things, but there doesn't seem to be a concerted and effective plan that is now ensuring that that is going to happen. Philip, do you feel that Kenya is now finally getting to a point where we can make a statement like this, every Kenyan will have a decent meal and it's going to happen, or is it just a nice thing to say?
You know, that is rhetoric. You know, there's no day everybody will have a decent meal.
Even those who are working.
That is a lofty dream, a lofty aspiration. And that it brings me back to the president. Let us give ourselves targets, manageable targets, 1, 2, 3, and we are going to deliver on this. The DP should be talking about agriculture. And he should tell Kiunjuri to go back to the office and attend to it. We come from North Rift, we plant a lot of maize. Right now our maize is still in the farm. It is raining, we don't know how it will dry. Of course, we are not going to throw it away. We will feed the nation on aflatoxins because I have to make profit from my farm. We need to see action, okay? The DP needs to rein in his lieutenants and tell them, look here, the president is trying to communicate, and this is what he's saying. Can we fall behind him and support him the next 3 years? If the president wastes the next 3 years in this country, it is not he who will have lost. It is the whole nation which will have lost. It's the nation that loses. And DP would be the biggest, though right now he's trying to place himself in a position at which he can totally blame the president for all the failures. But we elected him on the same ticket with the president, and we expect him to do more than the president. If the president stays awake for 12 hours, we expect him to do 16. Like he calls himself the president Spanner Boy, we expect him to live to that. We don't expect a lot of talk. We don't want promises. We know things that can and cannot be delivered. The president has set for us 6 items on the table, the big 4, corruption and national cohesion. Let's work on that.
All right, Ruth, is there anything that you possibly would have expected the president to have put in this speech that you did not get? Maybe areas that you felt he should have addressed?
I will be honest, I did not have many expectations. And honestly, I was one of those people, and I still do believe that sometimes when the president speaks off script, he gives us the reality.
Gives us more.
Yeah, he gives us a little bit more on the reality on the ground as opposed to some aspirations or a speech that is written for him. So if there was something that I expected different, was I hoped that at some point he would just put the speech aside and put the whole beautiful speech about bringing the country, the river, back to its trajectory, back to its source, and just tell us the truth, But I also feel like that the president has been speaking for so long. To some extent, we even chided him at some point on this show and said that it's about time that he stopped. Yeah, that he stopped talking and let us see some action. I feel that if there's anything more that he could put to the table is the fact that just change the way things are done. Osian had put it earlier on and said that from the moment the BBI report came out, we should have started seeing some change in the way things are done, because we know that Kenya has two biggest challenges, which is, resources, allocation of resources, allocation of appointments along tribal lines, as well as the fact that the economy is not doing so well. So over and above that, all we need to see is action. We need to see things done differently. Personally, I think I am extremely tired of speeches, and whenever it comes to speeches, I tend to switch off because I want to see action. I don't know whether Magal's issue was addressed a few weeks back when we were on the show. Magal talked about how there was a landslide in West Pokot. I am not sure whether that was, was it even mentioned?
No.
It was not mentioned during the speech. So clearly, some of the things that really mean much, that matter to Kenyans right now, did not really make it to the speech, because we would have probably even seen a moment of silence for the people who died in West Pokot. We didn't see that. So. Yeah.
All right. As we wind up on the Jamhuri Day speech, David Osiani, poverty eradication, hunger, health for all, illiteracy are things that Kenya has been talking about for 55 years. Unfortunately, that has not been realized, despite the wonderful speeches, despite the well-written speeches that have come to be. What does Kenya need to do to ensure that this now can change and we can say, yes, poverty has been dealt with, health has become a reality, illiteracy is not something that we're looking at anymore?
I will repeat two things: industrialization and agrarian revolution. We need to feed this country. We need to ensure that agriculture is lucrative and attractive, remove the middlemen as the BBI proposes, which is very key. It's one of the things I really liked. I just hope that there will be a proper way of telling us how we are going to remove the middlemen. Remove the middlemen, have an agrarian revolution, show young people that agriculture can be attractive. Be deliberate about it. You don't just sit here and say, oh, agriculture is good, go and farm.
Yeah.
And yet all of us are huddling. The person saying that is on a job and is not doing agriculture. He's a CS probably sitting and telling young people, you need to do jobs, and yet the CS applied for a job and is hired on a job, okay? And we need to, industrialization. That's part of the big four that I really love, because it said manufacturing sector needs to be given a boost. I saw in the president's speech a proposal to reduce the tax burden on micro, small, and medium enterprises. Some of these things are so beautiful, I wish they would be implemented.
Yeah.
When I sat on the first board that I sat on, which is now limping, almost dead, the first question I asked the CEO was, excuse me, sir, have you allocated 30% of your total business or total budget to youth, women, and persons with disabilities? And I think the government has it made that declaration that access to government procurement opportunities would be a thing, but they have not followed through. They should tell CEOs that as part of your appraisal, if you don't meet the 30%, you have lost 30 marks out of 100 on your appraisal. Let's see how many CEOs will joke with that. But because it is said and left there, so the president has given an instruction to the Solicitor General and the Attorney General to work on a bill that ensures that we can remove the red tape for businesses, micro and small and medium enterprises. I am one of those businessmen who run, micro, small and medium enterprises. And I can tell you, even getting credit, if you get a business opportunity today, don't even say 10 million, it's too big, and you just need a capital for 1 million shillings. Getting it is hell right from what you call the youth or women enterprise funds. It is crazy. The bottlenecks there you're given is to bring a logbook. Where will you get it from? And bring land or title deed. Where does that youth in my village in Rongo get that title deed? His father's land is on the name of the grandfather, and they're living there 11 uncles. There has not been a subdivision. He does not even have the money to go and do that subdivision. Where do they get all this? And therefore, how? That's why micro credit finance opportunities they have crazy charges. And no one is reining in on them. I don't know who they are feeding.
They're making a lot of money.
I don't know who they are feeding. We need to get to the bottom of it. They make ridiculous percentages, worse than banks. It's a rip-off. By the time you're done paying, and if you don't pay in time, they literally come for you.
Actually,
they will come for
call them Shylocks. They're literally Shylocks.
They are Shylocks. So the proposal yesterday was excellent, brilliant, but the president should have given a timeline. Get back to me in 2 weeks with this, so that when we begin the year, it is in Parliament. I know everyone will agree to it.
All right. And that was the speech. I'm sure you have your comments. We'll be reading through them later on, and you can send them via Twitter. But let's look at something else that's happened this week, and that, of course, was the arrest of Sonko, but also him being released. On one of the dailies today, he through his communications office, has said that he is still in charge, and he's going to continue being in charge.
Pipe to dream, pipe to dream, pipe to dream.
Which is leaving many Kenyans worried. There are several options. Maga, let me start with you. That can play out here. We're not saying whether Sonko is guilty or not guilty. He has a battery of lawyers who are going to deal with that. But the question is, Nairobi being a key county, one that controls a lot in terms of capital and even what happens, what do you see playing out here? Because we have several options.
The ideal position is that the MCS should take charge and impeach the man. After all, that is their mandate under the Constitution. In a properly functioning society, that is what would have happened. Jubilee, ODM should marshal their MCAs, an impeachment motion should be started, and the man should be impeached. That would be the easiest way out. I've seen people proposing that the president should dissolve Nairobi County. I mean, that is the nuclear option. Off the table, totally off the table. This is not an exceptional circumstance. And if it were, then it would mean the president has so much power. The president then would be in a position to dissolve any county government at will anywhere in the country. The second option on the table is for the judiciary to up its game. I was doing research on the time it takes to prosecute cases in the US, and there is data to the effect that in the state of South Dakota, it takes a maximum of 7 days for a prosecution to commence and end.
Wow.
In New Hampshire, it takes a maximum of 35 days to conclude a criminal prosecution. On average, it takes 20 days in the US to commence and conclude a prosecution. You can see how fast the Trump impeachment is proceeding. In Kenya, we are still prosecuting the Anglo-leasing cases. My question to the CJ, who wasn't in...
at the Jamhuri
yesterday. I don't know why he didn't show up.
Well, according to the stories that we've seen, it's because of goofs that have been there before.
No, he's holding a public office. That's not his private office. And that was a public function. He owed it to Kenya to go there and listen to what the president has to say about corruption. We have a special division purposefully set up to deal with corruption, so that these cases can be expedited, so that they can be concluded quickly. Sonko had been tried within 2 weeks. That is possible, isn't it? We had the presidential election petition had within, was it 7 days? Sonko can be tried within 2 weeks. We can have a verdict. If he's guilty, taken to committee. If he's not, he goes back to the office. Alternatively, there is a charge. In one of the cases, he was released from prison because, they say, he swore to the fact that he was terminally ill and that therefore he needed to have been released to go die in his home peacefully. But 18 years later, the man is still alive, meaning therefore that he lied to the court. Such a ruling can be revisited and reviewed. That would give the country a way out. The man tomorrow can wake up in Shimo La Tewa there would be no crisis in Nairobi. I mean, there is a litany of possibilities that can be used to deal with this situation.
Which we have chosen as a country possibly not to explore.
We've chosen to bang our heads on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruth, your thoughts, especially now that Sonko is still alive and kicking, even literally, by virtue of the fact that he has said through his communications office, he is still in charge, he is still the boss, and as much as he cannot access the office, he intends to continue being the county boss. And legally speaking, he still is.
Yeah. I mean, legally speaking, he still is, but technically speaking, the ruling by Justice Mumbi Ngugi, the effect was that if you are alleged to be involved in corruption, and I'm glad that we have gotten to this point, because I remember when Waititu's case was actually ongoing, Magal was of a different opinion that, you know, that Waititu was still a leader elected by the people and had the right to access office. I'm glad that now we are getting... I'm glad that we are getting to the point where we are agreeing that, look, these are serious charges. And one of the reasons why we are saying you cannot access your office is because we foresee a situation where you will tamper with evidence. Now, one of the things we need to understand is that legally speaking, if no case or if Sonko is not convicted or charged and arrested and if he's not arrested, convicted, charged within 12 months, then he can actually go back to office. And one of the questions on Kenyans' minds is that of all these people who have been, who have been convicted or who have been charged of corruption, none of them has ever been conclusively, the legal process has never been conclusively finished to the point where we are seeing somebody actually being jailed. Now that is the concern in Kenyans' minds, and that is where the question of the genuineness of the war against corruption coming in the sense that if it is truly genuine, why are we not seeing these people convicted, charged and eventually jailed? Because if he is not, within 12 months, then Sonko will resume office as governor. And for me, the other option would be that Sonko should just realize that, look, he has lost the war. This whole discussion about him still being the boss and having over 15 sub-county offices where he can operate from, he should take cue and learn from Waititu. Waititu is literally finished as a governor, the war is literally, he has literally lost the war. The other day there was a Jubilee meeting going on at Pangani, and Waititu attempted to access that meeting as the governor of Kiambu County. And what happened is that he was literally kicked out of the meeting, meaning that, for him, it was, the lines were just being drawn that, look, just give up on this, resign.
You may still legally be governor,
you might still be legally, you might be legally be a governor, but technically you're out. And I think Sonko also made so many mistakes when he was still, okay, I don't know why I'm calling, why I'm saying when he was still governor, but he's made so many mistakes during his reign, during his era that they're talking about coming to an end. For instance, the mistake of not having a deputy governor. I think whoever advised him maybe thought that, this would be his way out, that he would eventually claim that there is a vacuum in leadership. And that is one of the reasons why we have seen BBI proposing that Nairobi, the national government should have a right, so to speak, to be able to technically assist Nairobi County, and Nairobi County being the fact being that Nairobi County is one of the, it's one of the diplomatic hubs, globally speaking. So I think, to be honest, if you were to ask me, I think BBI really needs to start taking effect, because Nairobi is one of the biggest capital cities we do have in Africa, and it is not serving our interests if the county is not governable, or if the county does not have a proper leadership.
Okay.
Sonko should resign, because if you are to look at the case and the kind of evidence that is against him, Sonko should just see that this is a lost war and, just resign and let this go.
Unfortunately, we know our country, and rare is the time. In fact, I do not remember a leader who has resigned simply because they have been charged. They normally say over my dead body, or even if after 5 days they resign under pressure. But David Osiani, your thoughts on Nairobi County, because it has really brought a lot to the light. It may have been by design that Sonko did not have a deputy, but this has now landed us in a crisis. And politically speaking, possibly there are things that could have been done before we got here.
No, it was obvious. It is obviously by design, not maybe, that Sonko did not choose a deputy. Sonko knew that his day was coming. One, out of just not rendering his mandate, decently. And secondly, I suspect out of also not just honoring the deals agreed before he became governor. So, and you know, so much, the state is such a callous thing. If it wants you, it finds you.
Yep.
You know, if it wants to get a closet out there for you, they'll find it. If I was Sonko, I would not just thump and start saying how I am still in charge.
Yeah.
Because rulings in court are not entirely based on law. Some of them are based on demeanor. Whether you show that you're penitent, that you are remorseful, that you actually see the need for not having done some of these things, that there is a chance. You see, Sonko can chest thumb thinking that there is no dirt on him, or that he is too smart, that the things that are put in court count for zero. But my friend, the Sonko I know, even the case in the US against drugs on him can be revived, if need be. So Sonko, it is in his interest to demonstrate that he has understood that the magistrate Ogoti borrowed from the ruling by Ngugi that keeps governors out of office. And all the instruments of that office are at bay. So it is not about coming to show up and decide I can work from Kasarani. No, you can't, Mr. Sonko. It's not possible. And it is in your interest to demonstrate remorse, to demonstrate that you're willing to abide by the law, to demonstrate that you're going to go all out as a diligent citizen and just wait for the ruling to be made, because the ruling may be made in your favor. But if you decide to show the courts that, you know, it doesn't matter, I am 047, the governor, Governor Ray, and you want to show the courts that, my friend, these are the same courts that have declared that a governor without a degree can render his job, these courts of ours. They know very well that the law says a governor must have a degree, but they have said the governor has no degree, but he is effecting his role in such a way that looks like he understands what he's doing. You know, I mean, the same courts that we have in Kenya. So if they want to do you in, they will do you in a fine one. So Sonko, Waititu tried chest thumping. I can go and operate. Yeah. It would take 2-3 months later, he came on his knees. I'm willing to return all the money. And now running all over the president to go and worship around the president, where the president goes to church. He's there early. He has to be embarrassed to be removed and be taken to the 5th bench behind. Listen, dissent has to have a bit of decency. Mr. Sonko, stay home.
Stay home. All right, I'll need your closing remarks
just
now.
Just before you move on. If the man
put your closing remarks together with that, because we're out of time. If the man, but put your closing remarks together with that.
If the man cannot go to his office, if he cannot discharge his functions, on what grounds are Kenyans arguing that he can now appoint a deputy? Okay, it would mean that he can still run the show, isn't it? And so, to me, that argument is off the table. Again, mine is to send condolences to my brothers and sisters back in West Pokot. I still plead, I still urge the president to do something for the people down there. We lost almost 70 souls. The county is in mourning. We had a requiem mass on Wednesday. The families are free now to bury their departed ones. Kindly, I thank the country too as well. There was a great response from varied parts of from Osiani here, from Ruth here. We are grateful for the country for standing with us.
All right, Ruth, your closing remarks in a minute.
Mine today is very brief. For me, when the president talks about taking the country back to the river back to its course, and basically adopting the ideals of the independence generation and our forefathers, then I'm guessing what he's aspiring towards is the independence of each individual, in the sense that you can stand for yourself, that you can fend for your family, you can take care of yourself, you can be self-sufficient as an individual. We have a long way to go for as long as the young people are unemployed. We have a long way to go for as long as, doing business, the cost of doing business is still expensive and high for the youth in this country. Because much as we are talking about our forefathers, remember that the guardians and the people who, the safekeepers, the guards of tomorrow's promise for this country are the current youth of the nation. And if we cannot take care of the interests of the young people and ensure that for as long as they are coming out of school, they are going to school, they are studying, that at the end of the day, they can find something to do with their hands, if we cannot ensure that that is guaranteed, then the very youth whose future we are trying to secure for this nation will turn against the country. So I think as we are prioritizing very many other things in this country, amongst them being ethnic representation, unity, the interests of the young people must be taken care of first, because a country that is hungry and a country that is on its knees is one that can revolt against its own self.
Very easily. David Isiani, you get the last word.
The desire for a transformed country starts with us, each one of us. But the responsibility is greater and higher for the leaders. The president's intention for a more robust economy, for a country that is rid of corruption, for a country whose micro, small, and medium enterprises are growing, for a country that has a greater manufacturing sector and a more industrialized nation, will count for naught if the people entrusted with the duty sleep on the job. And whereas the president has the ability to administrative action to ensure that some of these people are fired yesterday, there are handicaps that have been demonstrated therein. My call is to every leader in this country. I have seen the United States, for example, saying that they want to reinvigorate the pyrethrum sector, and they're setting up a plant in Nairobi. The investor confidence in our nation will only and only be if we as leaders locally demonstrate to them that when they invest here, there will be returns for their investment. But if we are going to continue abetting corruption or continue with all this manner of shenanigans and dissent, then woe unto us. I urge all our leaders, join in this fight against corruption. You may say, yes, it's targeted against a few. I have come here and said before, if you feel that the war against corruption is targeted towards a few and leaving out the others, then you're doing a good job as a whistleblower. Please whistleblow so that you get your 5% on the people you think that are being spared the war against graft, so that then we can move the country forward. This is our country, and everything rises and falls on leadership.
Good place to end. Thank you very much, David Isiani, who is a governance consultant. Ruth Ambogo,